When you picture suburbia, what comes to mind? Probably neat lawns, quiet cul-de-sacs, backyard barbecues, and a sense of safety. But during the late 20th century, another story unfolded behind those closed doors. It wasn't about lawns or cookouts, but about intimacy, secrecy, and the bending of social rules. This is the secret history of swinging in suburbia. Suburbia sets the stage. After World War II, America built suburbs faster than ever before. The promise was clear: stability, safety, and a house of your own. Levittowns became the blueprint, with endless rows of identical homes, each with a family chasing the American dream. Suburbia changed the way people lived. On one hand, it created tight-knit neighborhoods where everyone appeared to share the same values. On the other hand, it gave couples privacy that city life didn't. You could wave to your neighbor across the fence, but once the doors closed, no one knew what happened inside. This new environment created a paradox. Publicly, the suburbs stood for conformity, decency, and family life. Privately, they offered cover for secrets. Some couples began testing boundaries that society still considered untouchable. And in those quiet cul-de-sacs, the seeds of an underground culture began to grow. Origins and contested claims. One of the most popular origin stories ties swinging to the US military during World War II. The claim goes like this: Air Force pilots, aware that many might not survive their missions, formed pacts to look after each other's families. Over time, looking after extended beyond friendship. Spouses reportedly became part of these informal arrangements, creating what some describe as the earliest form of swinging. Journalists like Terry Gould repeated this account in the 1990s, giving it credibility. But historians have raised doubts. The realities of wartime life, distance, constant movement, and the pressures of combat make the logistics unlikely. Researchers say it's better understood as a legend than a documented fact. And yet, myths have power. By connecting the origins of swinging to honor, risk, and loyalty, the story softened the taboo. Whether true or not, it suggested that the practice had noble roots rather than purely scandalous ones. As the 1950s and 1960s unfolded, this legend traveled from military bases to the growing suburbs, where it took on a life of its own. The 1960s to 70s cultural shift. The 1960s cracked open America's cultural norms. The sexual revolution encouraged people to rethink monogamy and morality. The birth control pill gave couples more freedom, separating intimacy from reproduction. Feminism pushed against rigid gender roles, asking what equality and independence could mean inside relationships. By the early 1970s, conversations about alternative lifestyles were bubbling into the mainstream. In 1972, the book Open Marriage became a bestseller. It didn't explicitly encourage swinging, but it did argue that relationships could be more flexible than tradition allowed. Talk shows and magazines debated the idea, and suddenly, non-monogamy was no longer invisible. Suburbia, often painted as conservative and uniform, was not immune. Behind those identical homes, curiosity grew. Couples who wanted more than routine saw an opportunity to explore, quietly, carefully, and within the privacy their new lifestyle provided. The key party: myth versus reality. Ask most people what they know about suburban swinging, and one image dominates: the key party. According to legend, suburban couples would attend parties, drop their car keys into a bowl, and at the end of the night, women would pull out a set at random, choosing their partner for the evening. The story became cultural shorthand. Movies, TV shows, and novels referenced it. The media hinted that somewhere in suburbia, these parties were happening regularly. The idea was shocking, scandalous, and easy to sensationalize. But when researchers investigated, they found little evidence. In reality, the so-called key party seems to have been more myth than widespread practice. While a handful of anecdotes exist, most people inside the lifestyle describe it as an exaggeration. Swinging did exist, but not through random lotteries of car keys. The power of the key party story lies not in its accuracy, but in its symbolism. It became a shorthand for suburban experimentation, whether or not anyone had actually drawn keys from a bowl. How the lifestyle actually worked. Behind the myths, swinging was far more organized and discreet. Private house parties were common, but they were invitation only. Couples invited people they trusted, and rules were usually established up front. Consent was key, and boundaries were often negotiated carefully. Some couples limited themselves to swapping partners with close friends. Others expanded their circles, creating networks of trusted participants. Over time, these networks spread into major cities. By the mid-1970s, swinging had become structured enough to support clubs. Plato's Retreat in New York became one of the most famous examples. It wasn't a random gathering, it was a full-fledged establishment, complete with memberships, rules, and a sense of community. In cities across the US, similar clubs sprouted up, offering couples a way to participate in the lifestyle without risking exposure in their immediate neighborhoods. Swinging wasn't a chaotic free-for-all. It was, in many ways, a controlled social experiment, operating in the shadows, but operating with rules. The psychology of swinging. What drew couples into this lifestyle? For some, it was about thrill, the excitement of breaking a taboo while still keeping up appearances. For others, it was about variety and novelty, a way to spice up suburban life. But many couples described it differently. They saw swinging as a way to be more honest than cheating. Affairs could destroy marriages because of lies and secrecy. But consensual arrangements, they argued, meant honesty and transparency. For some, this openness even strengthened their bond. Still, the risks were real. Jealousy could surface. Boundaries could clash. One partner might be more invested than the other. Psychologists who studied swinging found that outcomes depended largely on communication. Couples who spoke openly about their limits often navigated them successfully. Couples who avoided those conversations often struggled. Swinging became a mirror. It reflected the strength or weakness of the relationship. In some cases, it brought couples closer. In others, it revealed cracks that had long been hidden. The digital era. The 2000s changed everything again. What had once required private introductions and whispered networks now moved online. Early forums and chat rooms allowed couples to connect with like-minded people without relying on chance meetings. Dedicated websites and apps soon followed, making the lifestyle accessible in ways suburban couples of the 1970s could never have imagined. Digital platforms reduced the risk of exposure. Couples could browse, chat, and set boundaries before ever meeting in person. Online communities developed their own etiquette, safety rules, and cultural norms. Anonymity and discretion remained central, but the scale expanded. Researchers studying these online groups noticed something striking. They weren't just hookup boards. They functioned as communities, with discussions about trust, communication, and respect. In many ways, they echoed the suburban house parties of the past, private, rule-bound, and dependent on shared understanding, but now organized in a digital age. Where things stand now. Today, surveys suggest that a significant minority of Americans have either tried or considered consensual non-monogamy. At the same time, most still say monogamy is their preferred relationship structure. Swinging exists in this tension, visible but not mainstream, present but still taboo. The suburbs no longer carry the same mystique they once did. but the legacy of swinging lives on. From contested military myths to the whispered key party stories, from private house gatherings to digital networks, the lifestyle has quietly woven itself into American history. And while it may never shed its taboo completely, it remains a window into how people negotiate desire, secrecy, and commitment, even in the places designed to look the most ordinary. Suburbia was built to symbolize safety and tradition, but its privacy also made it the perfect incubator for one of America's most enduring taboos. Swinging didn't just happen in suburbia. In many ways, suburbia made it possible. If you found this history eye-opening, make sure to subscribe for more hidden stories about culture and the unexpected sides of everyday life.